Let's be clear. While we support this policy as it was used in Singapore, we do not support the underlying eugenic foundation of this policy. We do not think that intelligence, or specifically education, is something that is hereditary. What we are saying is that this model counteracts negative social incentives that lead to declining birth rates and negative incentives for individuals around the world. What is our stance? First of all, we support incentives for educated parents to have children. Secondly, this includes current benefits that we already generally only give that target exclusively educated parents. Like, for example, leave that only applies to white-collar workers, or childcare schemes funded by the government intended for working parents to raise their children better. We are also willing to support direct financial incentives. The voting opposition will question us on that, and we think this is an important part in the toolkit of measures that can be adopted by the government to encourage educated parents to have children. Third, we think that these benefits, critically, will only apply and can apply if only one parent is highly educated. And we think that you can define education based on things like your formal qualification, your job attainment, etc., etc. A matrix of factors that I don't think will be important, or that important in this debate. We're going to forward three claims. First of all, that we sidestep and avoid serious demographic issues. Secondly, that in many cases, and I'm going to make this claim carefully, it is better for children. And last of all, it is empowering for individuals, particularly women in the developing world. Firstly, that we sidestep serious demographic issues. But before that, sure.
Are you willing to extend these kinds of benefits to working class parents, given that not only white-collar individuals need leave from work for childcare?
We can extend a smaller scheme of benefits for working class parents, and we think that these can include things like childcare. But the main point that I'm going to make in my speech later on is that we need stronger incentives to counter the disincentives for the most highly educated of individuals to currently have children in mature society. So we think the problem faced by many countries that are developing is a demographic transition problem. As people become more educated, they have less of a reason to give birth, and there are huge social pressures imposed upon them to not have children, instead to pursue their career late into their 30s, for example, to pursue graduate degrees to succeed in a knowledge-based economy. Therefore, there are huge pressures prevailing on them against the prospect of stepping down and have children, even if they personally may want to. Because in many cases, this amounts to a coercive pressure on the part of these societies. What are the consequences of this? Firstly, and very obviously, many people seeking education are forced into a dilemma between the social and familial pressure not to have children and to postpone having children at a later date in favor of getting more education and pursuing their careers to a greater degree. We think that this ultimately harms the right to access, the right to have children, and the right to raise a family or to marry in a fulfilling manner. Secondly, we think that the more practical consequence of many of these demographic transition issues is aging societies. That is to say that a smaller number of young people support an increasingly aging population, especially in cities. While we understand that many countries have rural areas that, for example, may experience higher birth rates, I think the general trend in many of these mature democracies or many of these mature developed countries is that there are fewer and fewer people being born, especially in cities where these problems are most concentrated. What are the consequences of this? It means that in these areas, a very small and vanishingly small number of young working age individuals are supporting a larger number of older people who have reached mandatory retirement age and often cannot be increased further due to biological issues. Like, for example, in Japan, where one working individual may have to support 2.5 to 3 retirement age individuals by the end of this decade. The consequence of this means that there will be fewer, for example, welfare provisions created by taxation that are awarded to the elderly in these cases, and the elderly are able to enjoy the same kind of familial bonds and the same kind of structures of social support created by having young individuals within their communities. What are the benefits, therefore, from our side? First of all, we expand the population base such that more young working adults remain to support the elderly within many of these educated areas or areas which experience higher education in these societies. We think that alternatives like immigration don't work because in these countries, immigration is a highly politicized issue and it's impossible to raise the limit any more than it currently is. Well, thank you. Secondly, we also fulfill a vital access right, which is that individuals deserve to be able to choose their children unfettered by the disproportionate monetary cost it imposes on the educated in terms of postponing their careers. This is where we talk about why this benefit is exclusive to educated individuals, because the social incentives and the social pressures that force them not to have children become disproportionately more concentrated the higher they go in terms of education. We parallel this to, for example, how we already provide things like childcare programs up to age, which disproportionately benefit parents who are both in families where both parents are working and working for a longer time. So we think that this fulfills a vital access rights and avoids the problem of basic population issues and demographic issues in many of these societies. But secondly, why is it better for children? I'm going to make this very controversial claim, and we're going to try to make it very carefully. So what we're happy to say is that parents of all backgrounds can raise children equally well and in loving environments. We're happy to agree with that. However, the narrow claim that we are making is that on the comparative, we would rather this subsidy on educated parents to have children because it may be on the comparative better for these educated parents to have children in terms of raising these children in an environment that allows them to succeed in the knowledge economy. First of all, because in many of these cases, the obvious reason is that pregnancy is less likely to be unplanned, and we avoid the problems of that. But secondly, often education maps onto things like, for example, greater financial security or the environment in which you raise your children. Like, for example, the vocabulary that happens at dinner table conversations. For example, your ability to equip parents, your ability to equip children for the opportunities in the knowledge economy in the future, your ability to know which schools you need to send them to in order to position them for greater career success. All these are areas in which educated parents, generally speaking, may do slightly better in terms of raising their children. And we think that on the comparative, therefore, it is better that children be raised in these households. Although we can admit that parents of all backgrounds are equally able to raise children. We think that the specific unique capacity of educated parents will overextend to the financial security they're able to grant their children. Things like better nutrition, which might further increase their options later in life. So we don't think necessarily that this means that less educated parents don't deserve to have children. But what we are saying is that on the comparative, these financial subsidies in terms of maximizing the future prospects of these children should be applied to more educated parents. The third argument we're going to make is that this empowers individuals, especially in the developing world. So what we think is a problem in the developing world is that there's a tension between the pressures and the familiar pressures then to give birth and the converse pressures, for example, to move to cities and pursue education and future career success. We think that these pressures disproportionately apply in many communities to women who are told that they have to settle down, that they have to have a family before they can pursue their career or before they can pursue higher aspirations. We think that often the cost of just pursuing an education is disproportionately high, so that it's completely inimical to the prospect of getting married and having children. Because, for example, you have to spend all your savings to move to a large city where you can enter a school, you have to pay for your school fees and college tuition. What we do is provide a way for both of these benefits to be mutually inclusive. We admit that there might still be huge financial costs involved, and we can scale the cost, the amount, like the quantum of financial subsidy accordingly on our side to make it easier for these people once they are educated to have children. But what we do think is that we counteract these disproportionate pressures for them to not be educated, and we allow parents to have buy-in to send these individuals to schools because they have the assurance that in the future they may still have, there's a greater prospect or greater possibility that they will settle down and have children. Very proud to stand in future.
I'm going to be for a speech of one.
I think it was telling that stupid is one of the last personal pejoratives that we in society think it is okay to use. It is okay for us to call people dumb, idiotic, even though it is not okay for us to use pejoratives based on their race, class, and sex. Intelligence is the last criteria that we in society discriminate on. We reject this conception entirely. We would prefer a move towards full equality. What is our policy for today's debate? We think the state should largely be agnostic to two things. The first is whether or not you decide to have children. The second is whether, who decides to have children. In light of this, we don't think the state should be able to select for who gets to have children in any situation. If proposition 1, more kids, our motto is quite simple. We're going to direct more policy resources to doing things like encouraging immigration. Yes, it's politicized, so is this issue. I think it probably washes out, at least in the long run. The second thing we're going to do is directing more policy resources to doing things like state infrastructure, education, ensuring early childcare for individuals of all places if they want to access it. Because I think that's probably what stops most individuals from having children right now. So like a financial security that OJ is talking about. Last of all, we're going to target welfare and state support more towards communities that need them rather than otherwise. This will become apparent. The reasons for this will become apparent later in my case. 2 points of contention before I start on sex material. First of all, this idea that you are currently coerced into not having kids if you are a woman. I'm just going to repeat that for a second. If you are a woman, you are currently being coerced into not having children. This is a bizarre premise, and now that I said it really slowly, I'm pretty sure you can just think of intuitively why that is true, right? I think the environment that women are brought up in basically pushes them to have children, and it's actually really difficult to push back against the combined societal pressures that tell you your eggs are going to die by the time you hit 35, you're spending too much time in your career, why aren't you dating, why aren't you going out to meet nice boys, your biological clock is ticking. All of these things are mirror pressures that are already on women. I think that this actually tilts the balance even more to coerce them to have children. The second thing I want to point out is this is reparative in a sense, right? It's also hugely regressive because for ages, women have been entirely shut out of the workplace until they had to focus on their family and kids. I think this moves away from the progressive society. It's making that states women should have the right to do this and not focus on the family. The last thing they say is that but lots of people want to have kids. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is also true for the working working class families they don't really care about, and I think this makes it even more coercive for those particular subset of individuals whose choices they seem to ignore. The second thing I want to point out, this is also quite important, is the huge problem-solution mismatch going on from opening government's case. Opening government's big thing is that there is a demographic decline and that we don't have enough babies. Look, the highly educated population is a huge numerical minority in most countries. If your big problem is that people aren't having enough babies, you're going to be targeting an incredibly specific small subset of individuals to perhaps have more children. I don't think you actually solve many of the problems they want to solve on their side, so I'm not going to dispute their benefits or possibly having a larger tax base. Right, so 2 points for you today. First of all, on children intelligence, the state and principles. Second of all, on trade-off societal impacts and societal narratives. First of all, on children intelligence and state. Look, I think a democratic state, which is basically what the constraint within which we are working, has value insofar as it is a system that reduces concentrations of powers and increases redistribution. This means that a state must remain value neutral to arbitrary characteristics that probably can't be changed to a huge extent, like what kind of race you are born to, like what kind of class you are born in. Therefore, you have policies that explicitly prohibit discrimination against these kinds of factors. Why should intelligence be added to the list that we shouldn't be discriminated against? First of all, from government, the conception is that this is, at least to some degree, not up to you to control, because you can't control what kinds of families you are born into, and you can't control what kinds of families these subsidies are targeted towards. Second of all, your intelligence is very often measured by the really faulty IQ tests, right, as well as really faulty education systems. Your ability to access those kinds of systems that make you a highly educated individual also tend to be constrained by the fact that the government tends to redirect policies to already wealthy, already white, already upper class individuals. It tends to neglect places that they believe will never be highly educated. It tends to do things like tax property to pay for education in various areas. All this means is that certain classes of individuals are definitely shut out of this criteria, because I think education is something that is really difficult to access for a lot of individuals in the world. Why then should the government not discriminate based on children and your desire to want children? First of all, because individuals have a different conception of what a good life is, right? The government shouldn't step in to make this decision for them because it's highly personal and it's a lot of cost on you. Second of all, I think every encouragement by the government to have children is backed with force, even if it's not overt. No, thank you. The government controls many things like levers of power and can wield state power to the detriment of those who do not comply. Last of all, I think every encouragement is a kind of symmetric disencouragement of individuals who are not highly educated, right? So, first of all, if you don't want to make that choice because there's a huge impact on your life, you are now forced to fight against not just societal norms, but a state-directed societal norm that is telling you that you must make this choice for the good of society. No, thank you. Second of all, if you cannot make this choice because you are shut out of the benefits, you are just unable to access anything the opening government has laid out for you. The impact is this. For the individuals who are considered uneducated by society for reasons outside of their control, which I've outlined earlier, they are not only locked out already of job opportunities, of political power, they're also locked out of the ability to make free and fair choices about personal issues that directly impact them. What does this then do for societal narratives? No. First of all, I think that there's this prevalent underclass created, right? Consider the myriad advantages that we already offer to those that we consider to be educated. They have possessions of position of power, they're often the ones setting policy, etc., etc. All of these things, right? All of these things that opening governments say, they have access to dinner table conversations, they have access to financial security. All of these things are advantages that the government should not add on to because they already have enough advantages conferred to them by the state. Yes.
Do you support adding or distributing contraception in US communities?
We support distributed contraception everywhere. We think that safe sex and planning is just really important for everybody. We just like to have them make this choice for themselves. I think contraception is a way for you to choose not to have children even if you want to have sex. Sex doesn't always lead to babies. Right, so what does this do? It perpetuates a cycle that entrenches the advantage of future financial prospects that OG is talking about when they say this is the best way to raise children. I think you also entrench the narrative that education and intelligence is something that you are more or less born with, and it's increasingly correlated with class and therefore race. It creates a future where only certain educated children are going to considered to be the elite of society and are in a place to implement policies that will then perpetuate their own advantage. What is the trade-off here? The trade-off is with other policies that help you grow a more educated society as a whole. From opening government stance, what you can basically see is they're hoping to get more intelligent people into society, right? I think what this does, this kind of attitude means that you don't focus as much on promoting things like education for everybody because you then consider education or intelligence to be something you can breed into individuals. I think on our side, you are far more likely to have a world where you're able to push for things like additional infrastructure, additional education, and additional welfare. Very, very happy to stand on the side that allows for this infrastructure development and educational development to happen. Incredibly happy to oppose.
Next speaker for that speech.
without state intervention, the demands of market capitalism are such that highly educated parents are disincentivized from having children. Arthur told you why the state is a moral and pragmatic imperative to step in. And keep this in mind as I talk to you about two things. First, I'm going to discuss the moral claim that we bring to the table, the equitable access to parenting. Second, I'm going to talk to you about pragmatics, where I'm going to fold in the issues of demographics as well as the issues of gender equality. First, on the moral claim. Now, I'm going to introduce the concept of content-neutral positive freedom. The idea that people should be free to do whatever they want, so long as the process through which the decision is made allows for rational consideration of the alternatives. And I think we need to ask the question, why are educated parents unfree? And I think the answer to that is that success in a knowledge economy and the expectations of white-collar work are constructed in a manner such that highly educated parents are forced into an invidious dilemma between their careers and family. All tells us that this is not unique to highly educated parents. I have two responses. First, that the rise of two-parent households is unique to white-collar work, especially in light of women being increasingly educated and aspirational. And that's a great thing. But we see, for example, that 80% of working-class families in America are single-income households. But when we apply that to white-collar households, this number drops significantly. The second response I have is that education also means that you tend to plan for a family later because you have a closing window of opportunity. You're investing more years in pursuing higher education, and as a result, the years in which you are more able to have a family or to plan for kids are a lot more diminished, and as a consequence, structurally speaking, you are less able to have children. The second thing that all told us is that we are a discriminatory side. How is your IQ any different from issues of race or religion? And our answer is very simple. This is misrepresentative. It doesn't. But IQ is a great predictor as to the factors that are acting on your choice set. That is to say, the factors that are affecting your consideration. What did it all tell us? They told us that, but so long as you want children, the government should facilitate that choice. I think what UNTIC ignores is that the problem is that if we replace childbirth with smoking, that would make no sense. The question is why the right to progeny is intrinsic to a sense of fundamental self, right? That I need to be able to extend my capacity to have a family in order for me to achieve the good life in a way that many other things that governments discourage you from doing. For example, smoking or engaging in alcohol are left with things like a syntax that disincentivize choice. But before I go on, yes?
Sure. So if your problem is that progeny aren't necessarily intrinsic to your fundamental self, why do you then care if people choose to make the very legitimate choice to build an identity around not having children, even if they're highly educated?
No, we're entirely fine with that. That is why we're not forcing you to have children. I think the problem is that you're equating a policy of nudging to realign incentives with a policy of coercion. And until you can prove to me that a policy of nudging, that is to say, to realign incentives, is equivalent to forcing someone to make a choice, I don't think you can win this debate. The second thing that Andrew told us was this idea of double jeopardy, right? That the uneducated are already locked out of jobs, and we shouldn't stop them from having kids as a second problematic consequence. After asking this POI, we should then support targeting contraceptive and family planning resources in depressed households. Andrew said, no, we're going to target it everywhere, ignoring, of course, that there is no magic money tree, that there are opportunity costs when it comes to state policy. And at the point at which they fail to acknowledge that family planning and contraception is often mutually exclusive from your capacity to be able to uplift yourself, especially when in a circumstance of disprivilege. No, thank you. I think they lose this debate because they fail to recognize that you can't have your cake and eat it, right? You can't on one hand argue that we should target this policy everywhere and anywhere without at the same time recognizing that there's significant opportunity costs when it comes to facilitating the upliftment of the underprivileged. Let me explain to you why there is a mutual exclusivity here. First of all, if there is less access to family planning and contraception, there is a higher likelihood that your capacity to invest in your own knowledge and your own skills are diminished because you have to care for more children. Second of all, if you're, say, a single parent, the debilitating effects of not being able to work for a good 4 or 5 months as a consequence of pregnancy, especially if you're working in a highly service-oriented and physical job, entails, I think, that you are less able to obtain money. So I think all the points that Arthur told you about how state resources need to be targeted in order to uplift people, especially those who are the least worst off, is very important. The thing is, we support the provision of state services in terms of finance and in terms of targeting these services. The only difference is the types of services we extend to different groups of people differ. We aren't going to disincentivize poor people from having children. We aren't going to tell you that if you have a second kid, we are going to, fine you $2,000. And if David is really going to argue that paying you $2,000 is the same in effect as fining you $2,000, that's very different, right? Because in the case of not having a child, you have access to things like family planning resources like contraception that doesn't actively change your capacity to make that choice. The second area I'm going to talk to you about is pragmatics, right? And we give you two ideas here. First, that there are demographic problems of many middle and high income economies. Until told us If your problem is that people aren't having enough babies, then why target a small demographic? Two responses. First of all, because this is a demographic, the lowest fertility rate and birth rate in these economies. If 30% of the economy has a total fertility rate of 0.2%, but the other 70% of the economy on average has a total fertility rate of 2.5%, let me suggest to you that perhaps the best way to go about things is try to bring up that 30% to a total fertility rate of like 0.8 or 1, as opposed to trying generically try to increase the total fertility rate. And I think the reason why is because in many cases where you are not a highly educated parent, you are already at the optimal level of children that you might want. You don't want to have any more children. It is untrue that we are just targeting a small demographic without caring about the broader situation. The second response is that the alternatives that Ernting provided, like immigration, are far more politically sensitive as opposed to this policy. Let me explain. The thing is, when we target incentives at a particular group, for example, when the government says, if you are above a certain income class, we provide tax subsidies on investment, people don't go up in arms about that and say, oh, this is fundamentally discrimination. But at the point at which you support policies like immigration, which are near and dear to many people's sense of self, their sense of nation, and their capacity to find a job, especially in a working class economy, that's what matters and triggers in the hearts and minds of people. That is why we see nativist sentiment being triggered by the influx of immigrants in Western liberal democracies, but we don't see the similar power of left-wing populist politicians who campaign for things like greater equality. And I think the reason is simple, right? Issues like immigration and social culture affect the political consciousness of an entity far more than whatever alternative that we are presenting. The last thing I told you is that this empowers women, especially in developing countries. Ernting said, if you are a woman, you are already being encouraged to have children. I think this is very misrepresentative. I can agree that the pressure does exist today on women to have children. I think we can entirely concede that. The issue is, very often, women, because of this pressure, are forced not to go to school or are forced not to advance their careers as a consequence of needing to balance the demands of their aspiration with what their family requires. And I think what we do is that we try to better align this incentive as what Arthur told me. So I think that's very misrepresentative rebuttal to our argument. For all these reasons, I'm so proud to be with this.
Speaker for that speech.
I want to look at three things in this speech. Does this benefit society? Is this good for children? Does this treat parents fairly? Let's talk about society. The key problem that the opening government identifies is the problem of low birth rates because people face pressure to delay or avoid having children because of their work. The assumption in this case and the causal mechanism by which they fix this problem is that raising the birth rate specifically of highly educated parents raises the birth rate overall. That is false, and here is why. Number one, in countries that are not Singapore or Japan, the proportion of highly educated parents, and the word highly is in the motion, to non-highly educated parents is incredibly small. And here's why. Number one, higher education, in general, is quite expensive. Access skews in favor of privilege. You have time to stay in higher education for more years, even though there's an opportunity cost of your ability to make an income right away. You have connections to legacy networks that enable you to rise up the ranks to get access to those institutions to begin with. So, and broadly speaking, like universities like preserve brand reputation by limiting access for. So that's the reason why in most countries around the world open to everyone to access. So to be very clear, this policy takes one specific slice of individuals in society that is small and encourages them to have children. The second thing to say about this is that there are worse pressures on everyone else to not have children. And here is why. We have to look at the opening government. Oh, it's really hard being a highly educated parent, right? It's so difficult to find the time to have kids. Do you know how hard it is to have a kid if you're a working class parent? Number one, children are extraordinarily expensive. You have to pay for their medical fees from every day from when they are born to the age of 18. You have to pay for their education from when they are born to the age of 18. You have to make sure that you spend time with them, which takes up time which you could otherwise be spending working. Noting clearly that being from less highly educated backgrounds does correlate very tragically with being from a lower income or lower earning family. That means that there are enormous pressures specifically on this much larger class of people to not have children. To be very clear, the consequence of their policy is it's even harder for the majority of society to have children, and here is why. Because as Chin admits, the amount of money we have is not infinite. Anything tells you what we are going to spend that money on. This is what the explicit counter she gives you. It's on distributing welfare more broadly. It's on making it easier for parents who are working to not have to have more time to spend with their children, which alleviates the pressure to not have children, because now they have access to more welfare schemes that enable that sort of parenting time to be available. So to be very clear, that is the comparative. Ours is a broad-based welfare support program which trades off against the specific financial benefits they give to this one group of individuals. That's why it's better. Also, to be very clear, as we pointed out, we think this is not about encouraging parenting specifically, but we're giving these options more broadly to people. It's about poverty alleviation in general, which enables specific people who want to have parents within that set to be able to do so. Second, I want to add here, it's very important. There are non-state alternatives for highly educated parents to pursue parenting on outside the house. Here's why. Highly educated parents often have the ability to politically advocate for certain rights, like the right to increase maternity leave or increase paternity leave. This means that the way you gain access to these provisions is through the state or the corporations for which you work. Those alternatives exist on outside the house, specifically for highly educated parents as well. We think that education will go on as it has been historically and recently. That means, broadly speaking, we elevate the birth rates of both these communities of that case. Because highly educated parents get to pursue these policies on their own, and everyone else benefits from broader-based poverty alleviation. To be very clear, all of the impacts in this case, all the major impacts about the elderly being lonely in society, collapsing, and an aging population, rest on the premise that their side increases birth rates. We've shown you that it's better on our side of the house. Does this treat parents fairly? Chin tells us this is about nudge, and it's like giving one person $2,000 is not taking one out of $2,000 to someone else. Where does the $2,000 come from? Like, Chin admits to us that money is finite. Eunting points out we will spend that $2,000 giving someone else access to, say, improving a school, say, which increases access to education for someone else. So it is taxing someone else $2,000 because there is a finite amount of capital to go around. Yeah, go for it.
So I just want to ask an empirical question. What proportion of, say, Malaysia's population is university educated?
Not large. Neither in the United Kingdom, neither in the United States of America, right? Not large compared to the vast majority of people living elsewhere. If you genuinely want to tell me that there are more people with university educations in like the United Kingdom than there are working class individuals across the country as a whole, that is just factually false. But even if it were true, we pointed out, there are alternatives for that set of people that are political, that flow through corporations giving them benefits, not from the state specifically. Okay, let's talk about nudge here. Eunting points out the narrative you create around what it means to be a good parent, because even if this is not the explicit purpose of that policy, that is how it is perceived. You are giving benefits specifically to individuals who are highly educated backgrounds to their children. This means the way it plays out in personal conversations, in the way you interact with other people, is colored by the fact that you are encouraging a specific demographic to continue breeding, which trades off with another demographic being told to stop. That means you've created a narrative around individuals who are not highly educated that says they are less worthy of continuing the genetic line. They are less contributive to society in the long term. This is bad for them. It leads to bad outcomes in terms of the way we treat them, the way we perceive them, the way we give them opportunities, and so on. It also means that there's a strong deprivation of choice that we give them. Because a parent who is from a working class family may want to have children. It is harder for them to have children. That money is taken away given to someone else who doesn't. We think the state owes special obligations to those people who are in less privileged positions as a consequence of the way it has arranged society so as to disadvantage them. That means this policy takes money away from that set of people and gives it to those who are already in a position of privilege and power, and we think that is abhorrent. Let's talk about whether this is good for children. They tell us that highly educated parents may do slightly better at maximizing their children's prospects in the long term. Our response is that a broader educational infrastructure, which is the relevant comparative in this case, is better at maximizing children's prospects. Two reasons for this. Number one, teachers are actually trained educators. It is true that interacting with your parents regularly may alter your life prospects in future. It is also true that interacting with the teachers alters your life prospects so much greater too, because they are trained educators who are practiced in communicating information to children. But also, it's important to give access to all people, rather than to a broad-based benefit from infrastructural spending, than to give benefits specifically to parents and individual family units, and assume that people who are within those family units are able to access the benefits that flow from that. So it is about maximizing children's prospects. Again, to be clear, the comparative is broad-based infrastructural spending on education that trades off against that money they would spend promoting individual families. And we think those effects are broader. We think that individual educators have better expertise to make that sort of communication. Also, this is the final point about the developing world. I think this case amplifies pressures to have children on that side of the house. Because the argument that is currently made is that I don't have time to have children. I can't do it, right? I can't have it all currently because of the limited amount of time I have, the limited amount of money I have. Their policy would alleviate those barriers, to change the dynamics of that conversation, so that your parents say, yes, you can have it all. You can have those children. You should, so you better well do it because that's your duty as a woman. You've taken away the only bargaining chip that women currently have to stay in the workforce on their side of the house, because even if you are given special family benefits, you still have to take out 9 months and all the time afterwards from your job, and that harms women in that specific context. This is a disgusting policy, and it's a massive problem solution mismatch. Very happy to stand in opposition.
Thank you for that speech. And then you the top part.
I'm going to do two things in this speech. I'm going to resolve the top half clash, and I'm going to talk about the pathways that people take to have children and why it is far, far superior if you embrace policies like radical expansion of paid parental leave, for example. On the first question of what the first top half clash is, I think that OG correctly identified that there is a disproportionate pressure that's based on educated people at the top of society to not have children. OO also correctly identified that there is a strong pressure that exists on all women to have children in the first place. The way that you resolve this clash, though, is that the countervailing pressure that OG identified means that women that are particularly wealthy or privileged are unlikely to have significant pressures on them. Women that are not in that class or in that category are only subject to the pressure to have children. The outcome of that claim, then, is that it would be wrong to place more pressure on women who are not in the highly educated classes to have children, because as they correctly identify, that would place a disproportionate amount of pressure on them and lead to enormous and significant harms. For people at the top, though, you avoid those problems in their entirety, because we already had a countervailing pressure. What we would seek to do was to alleviate that very specific one. But in response to their idea that we should pursue formal equality, I think the problem with this is that people reside in radically different situations with different expectations around them. For example, girls at private schools are expected to go to university and have careers in ways that girls that are not in those kinds of environments are not. And so to pursue a formal position of equality is one that would seem ridiculous. It seems far better to try and tailor state policies to the outcomes. The outcome of this introduction, then, is we've got above OG, because we're able to specifically identify why you should not extend this policy to groups who are not in the upper echelons of society, because they exist in different positions and need to not have that pressure applied to them. So therefore, I think that we're able to then resolve that top half clash in a way that I think agrees with the arguments that both teams have made and reconciles them in a way that is consistent with the real world. Yeah, I'll take OG.
Assuming that what matters is the demographic pressure to not have children, we've explained why there is greater pressure on the working class to not have children. So if the metric is on promoting childbirth, as opening government says, that is a better way to alleviate that pressure, generally speaking.
Yeah, but your mechanism by which the working class would have pressure not have kids, as you say, it's hard for them to do so. I think it is probably hard for everyone to have children because for everyone it involves a sacrifice. Probably there's actually more of a sacrifice if people are wealthier because they have to give up far more of their income, they have to give up far more living standards by virtue of the fact that they were able to earn more in the first place. So I think that their mechanism is inconsistent and all they've done is just repeated what they said in their first time, which I think I just dealt with. So, on to extension, I think it's much more fun. What I'm going to talk about is two things in terms of the pathways that people have to have children. Firstly, in regards to people who are wealthy and educated. The thing that I would observe here is that many people recognize there is a very strong disadvantage for them to have children at an early age. Many people feel like they should not have children when they are young because they worry about what it will do to their careers. This powerful narrative that exists in society that says that if people take time out of their careers when they are young in having children, then they are likely to suffer enormous harms. This makes them delay that for two reasons. Firstly, in terms of the career stuff, but more than that, I think that when people are wealthy, they have specific expectations that in future, so when people are educated rather, expectations for the future they'll be really wealthy, be able to provide for their kids in a much better way, in the sense that women from the working class or women from less educated positions are less likely to hold that kind of belief. So what that means is they're uniquely likely to delay the time when they have children to a point where they are later in their careers and later in their lifespans. The problem that occurs here, though, is that in many cases people are not able to achieve the career successes that they envisage for themselves. They're not able to achieve the benefits that they thought they would be able to access by delaying having kids till later, for the reason that when people are 23, they have incredibly optimistic goals about what their career is like to look like in the future, same at 28. But what happens after that is in many cases people can't achieve those positions. People view themselves as being superior to where they are. And so the optimism and the benefits that they think they'll be able to extract don't materialize. At the same time though, in many cases the costs that accrue to them from having kids later are very substantial, because in many cases they'll have more obligations, they'll have more requirements to be at work, they'll have more requirements to pay a mortgage, they'll have more requirements to not take time off of work in order to have children in those kinds of contexts. The problem that occurs though is that at the same time, these groups are people who want to have kids, who still believe that it would be good for them to have children, in part for the reasons OO identifies, and also because I think there's a general idea that people want to have children for themselves. And so that then places them in a position where they feel really obliged to have children later on in life in a way that is harmful to them. What we were able to do though was compensate for that initial harm to the career by implementing this kind of policy. We're able to compensate for that harm. People can have children earlier at a time when it is more convenient for them to do so, and it will improve their quality of life in ways that are really significant and substantial. That implies then that the pathways that these people are likely to take to have children are ones that are utile and beneficial, and means that they can have an easier lifetime in terms of raising children. On the second claim, what happens to poorer parents? The claim that I will make here is that I think that in general, many people want to have kids and see it as a life aspiration of theirs to have children, see it as their role and existence for being, for the reasons that OO identifies. This is, I think, a narrative that is particularly prevalent in poorer communities for the reason that the role models that they are surrounded by is people that come from those same backgrounds. Their mothers, in many cases, didn't pursue a career. They didn't pursue the kinds of other alternatives people are likely to go through. So the things that they see modeled for them fall specifically in the category of having children earlier and having them in ways that are likely to suggest that it's the reason for being. They don't have alternatives to go through. What is likely to happen though is they have reasons now to pursue higher education in ways that they did not before. This is true because OG's model says you receive enormous financial benefits by going through an educational system, by getting a degree in something we didn't really care what it was. But that does a couple of things that I think are really important in countering these kinds of narratives. The first thing to say is that many mothers feel like they are socially isolated. Many mothers feel like they don't have a very powerful social network and recognize that after birth in particular they feel isolated in those contexts. They get a more expanded and broad social network when they go to universities and are separated from those kinds of peers. Secondly, university is a different environment to where many people previously grew up. It facilitates access between classes in ways that things like higher schools do not, because they have much more localized experiences there. This means you're likely to have access to far more groups of people with different aspirations. So it gives people more ideas about on alternatives, about ways they may want to choose to live their lives, which means that many of them may elect to choose not to have children. This counters some of the social pressures that OO identifies that accrue specifically to poor mothers. Though I just think that in general, education is a thing that is useful, and a thing that people ought to be able to prioritize. It makes people's lives happier, and enables them to raise kids in more effective ways, as I think OG is sort of like we have to connect this about how they get there. Lastly, I think you can have a far easier time having children. Currently, poor mothers lack political capital. They lack the ability to lobby in ways that are particularly powerful or effective. If you specifically target resources towards wealthy parents, those are the ones that were the elites, the ones that were most likely to be able to lobby for things like more paid parental leave, like more ability to access education and clinics and hospitals and schools. And these are the kind of groups that were really important to get on side. We uniquely can trade them though, because we always have more political capital to donate to those groups, to more ways to encourage them to have kids and to lobby for kids having rights. That's why we affirm.
Thank you for that speech. Alt 3.
I think when most people in this debate heard the claim that educated people are happier and everyone nodded, people assumed that that was just true. But as someone who didn't necessarily come from the world's most educated or rich background, that struck me as being slightly offensive and intuitively wrong. Because a lot of people who aren't that educated lead very happy lives. In fact, we think the best people to have kids are vibrant communities that maybe are lower socioeconomic groups. Maybe they're blue collar, but they're still vibrant, they're still rich, and they still love their children the most and raise those children to have far richer lives. We're going to talk to you first about how we provide kids to the right parents when we do the opposite of what they're saying and give money to lower socioeconomic groups. And secondly, why we think kids are better for the working poor and for lower socioeconomic groups because they bring those groups together. But first, a touch of rebuttal. Opening government told us we need young people in the economy. But the weird thing is, they're like, well, our economy's too top-heavy, we've got all these old people. Presumably what we need are like carers and builders and all the like working class jobs that support the people who are wealthy and retiring, right? We don't need heaps and heaps of like highly skilled people at the top end who are basically chasing money and working to support themselves. So we think you get the wrong people under their proposal. So to the extent we are going to provide money, we think we should provide it to the people who are going to give us the workforce we need to support an aging population. Even if that wasn't right, all of the reasons for why kids are better raised under their model were really dodgy, right? They're like, oh, they'll learn vocab at dinner. They'll be like nutritionally fed. Yeah, they're not raising a child in a lab, right? We're raising a human being with emotional needs, and we think richer communities are likely to do that better. We'll talk about that later. Then, at closing government, I just want to hit this now, even though it kind of relates to our extension. They were like, these are people who really want to have kids, they just can't. Okay, firstly, we deny that premise. We think that rich people have unique ability to have kids and work because they're likely to have skills that they can trade off with their employer to say, I want some leave for a few months to have a child. We support paid parental leave, by the way. I think that has been pretty clear from our opening. But more importantly, we think that they're way more able to work flexibly. If you're a builder, right, you can't take your laptop home from the office and say, sorry, my kid's sick, I'm just going to run home. You can do that if you're a high educated person who works in an office as like a corporate lawyer. So we think that it's far better to place our resources on the people who want to have kids but can't, rather than these people probably have the best access to kind of flexible working that allows them to have it. So why do we give kids to the wrong parents under their proposal? The question here is what is actually best for the children. That's the first thing we're going to start with. We think highly educated people aren't necessarily good parents. They're probably neurotic and stressed and type A personalities. These particular people probably chose to have kids for a variety of reasons which were never identified by the government, right? Maybe you're really highly educated and driven and you feel like you don't have enough emotional room to have a child. This is a legitimate choice, by the way, not having kids. And we think if you're really stressed and you work really long hours as like a brain surgeon or something, you might just feel like your job is the most important thing to you and you don't want the stress and emotional stress in your life, and that is totally legitimate. But maybe they're just not that maternal or paternal, right? Maybe they didn't have good parents themselves and they just don't feel equipped to have children. Maybe they feel like they probably wouldn't be able to connect with a child. Right? In the spectrum of human psyche, there's always going to be some people on one end who really feel like they would be a great parent and have like a real desire to do that, and another group who are like probably just want to be driven and find satisfaction in other areas. It's totally legitimate to make that choice. But it's also terrible to force those people or tell those people that A, there's an expectation now for them to have children, and two, to give them the financial incentives that make that choice that they otherwise wouldn't have. We think that is likely to make bad parents. We think they're probably not going to have the emotional capability to look after children in the same way as a parent who was desperate to have a child. And we just think that's going to affect children by making them strung out, possibly live with someone their whole lives who's a bit cold, like not feel very supportive. Like, you know, sometimes rich people's parents become, like, rich people's kids become drug addicts or drop out of school or whatever. Often those kids maybe felt like something was emotionally missing in their lives. We're not going to say that happens to all of them, but it's probably going to be more likely to happen under that scenario than a poor person who really loved the child. So why do we think that blue-collar parents are better? We think that these people live in vibrant communities, they tend to have large families. We're talking about people like maybe the Pacific Island communities in Australia or black families in the southern US, right? They tend to have larger families that are warm and stable. Childcare is taken care of by a variety of people in that community, and kids know they've always got someone to talk to, someone in their peer group, right? They're not a solo kid living in an apartment being looked after by a person they don't know with the government money that these people are providing. They have someone to talk to, and they have the kinship that makes them feel like they are loved and that they can be happy. We think that maybe these kids don't get an iPhone for Christmas, but they probably get a lot of love every day that allows them to pursue whatever their own self-definitional ideas of what happiness is. We think that these people are probably more likely to go to blue-collar jobs, and we're willing to accept that. But we think they'll probably be happier. Like, I'm a corporate lawyer. My life is pretty stressful. Would it be on net worse if I was a builder who was just like happy and had a great family and like enjoyed my life every day? Probably not. Probably similar or better level of job, satisfaction, maybe it's something I should consider. But what I'm saying here is that it was wrong to assume that that was incorrect, and we think that these kids would be happier in these families. Yeah, real quick.
How does your extension square with OO's argument that the less educated are the most vulnerable and most need upliftment to be a good education for children?
You just wait, mate. That's my second substantive point. So, kids are a great agent for building trust and bringing these communities together. So we think without kids, these communities are likely to be like that, and so we think it's best to support them. We think first because it provides trust in low socioeconomic communities, right? We think big families where everyone is in the same community and the same culture likely builds trust in these communities that are probably skeptical against a state and the white middle class. We think that they provide family labour to support local enterprise. So we're totally happy if kids grow up and work in the family restaurant or in the family construction company. We think that probably makes those communities richer and better because they have like a pool of people to work with who they trust. We think this also allows people to spend more, to spread their risk. Like if you're a low socioeconomic community and you have a massive family, one of those people is like to do well and be able to support your community. And more importantly, it provides touch points with the rest of the world. Like if you have a child in a low socioeconomic community that does very well and works in an office with heaps of fancy people, that provides a link between like the high socioeconomic groups and the lower socioeconomic groups and allows dialogue to take place. We think that if you're going to give money, it should be to these communities, and we think that they can't just say this isn't mutually exclusive without like destroying all of their points about how only wealthy people or educated people are better parents. Like it would be a principal harm if these guys now stand up and say, yeah, we'll support lower socioeconomic groups, given that all of your opening bench material was about how educated people are better parents. We're proud to oppose.
The Australian government used to have a policy called the baby bonus, where if you had a child, they would pay you money for having that child. It was supposed to cover things like nappies and things like that this side wanted to care about. What we saw instead was a massive increase in parents having children and teen pregnancies and things like that in poorer communities. These weren't table tapping things. These were things that ruined people's lives and left them destitute because they were unready to have children. They misread that financial incentive, and it stacked on top of the numerous incentives that already existed on poor mothers to have kids in poorer areas. This wasn't a debate about rolling out welfare to poor communities. We support the status quo where there is welfare in poor communities. This was about balancing a specific incentive that existed on wealthy mothers that do not have children, and we were the only side that alleviated that. Let's look at CO's extension and just knock them out really quick. They have an idea, which I think is bad, that they're worse parents. And I think that sits in tension pretty clearly with OO's we should be agnostic to parenting styles and there is no characteristics we ought to prioritise. So I think that's a big fat knife there and probably bad for them. But also, all the traits they listed are not class specific. Long hours correlate to both wealthy and poor parents. Being neurotic is not a fun thing you inherit the more paychecks you get. Even if this side are a bunch of neurotic corporate lawyers, I would suggest there are nice corporate lawyers. I think maybe there are neurotic builders. We just don't know. I think what this suggests is that parenting is pretty subjective. It is often pretty tailored to the child, and that is fine. And that's why everyone should have access to having a kid. That's why that's why our material about being forced to have children later in life, where you might miss out on that opportunity because you might become less able to have them due to the virtue of age, due to the virtue of circumstance, due to your situations and your pressures not resulting in that, actually abrogates this policy that they actually want to stand for. Because it was bad when people who were expecting to make a lot of money delayed this right to have kids, delayed this choice that they thought to be particularly meaningful because they thought they were going to get a substantial increase in income, which doesn't always materialise. And we thought we were best able to give people the most choice when they were empowered to have kids at the time that was most ideal to have children, when you were younger and not 45 and not subject to a bunch of health constraints and work constraints. So, I think this is a pretty irrelevant question as to who is a better parent and what kids happen. The question is, how do we both maximise that choice for people without placing undue pressure that forces women out of the workplace? So, the second question then becomes, why do poor people have children? And I think intuitively, right, they have a higher birth rate and we have a specific disincentive in wealthy communities That suggests things like a lack of education, a lack of willingness, for example, to pursue higher education or even to finish high school, correlate with things like high teen pregnancies, correlate with things like prioritizing family because you don't have a clear aspiration to go seek after, correlate with things like, for example, the opportunity cost of taking time off is not as big because you don't have great career mobility if you're working in a low ACS job. Because once you are, for example, the manager of a store, there is not a lot of career trajectory for you in the same way that if you are a corporate lawyer at 22, when you take time off, you substantially jeopardize your career. This was about a difference in lifestyle and a difference in living standard. This wasn't about prioritizing one over the other. It was about recognizing the unique pressures that sat on women in different communities. That meant, for example, the vibrant communities you were talking about could exist in either world. However, the vibrant communities in poorer communities were often laden with particular social pressures that prioritized family over a career because they had no clear career models of achievement, because most of the women in their life, for example, often were not working because most of the women in those communities had never attained higher education. They did not see those things as valuable, and maybe they're not sometimes, but we thought it was about allowing choice and alleviating that pressure that told people it was not valuable. That's why Jacob's material about why this allows women to pursue higher education was so valuable, because we thought it was important that, for example, women were educated civic citizens, women had that ability to alleviate that pressure, and so when they said, I want to, for example, have a child, I'll take one, just relax, I wanted to have a kid in a sec, they could do things like, I will go achieve a university degree, receive this financial incentivization, then have my child, and then be like financially better off. That was amazing because you pulled people out of poverty, you disrupted cycles that said you should not finish school, you disrupted cycles that said that you didn't belong in the workplace, you disrupted cycles that led to legacy building that this side wanted to talk about that you receive at universities and education like that, and we thought that was particularly valuable. I'll take closing.
Your point, there are neurotic builders, just sidestepped all of my analysis about why people who are very high achievers and people who might just be on one side of the spectrum of like personality might choose not to have kids. We think it's bad to force those people to have kids.
Why are you forcing them to have children if they don't want to do it? So that money is irrelevant to you, for example, if you can pursue a career that is particularly meaningful, but you're not forcing them to have it. I think that misunderstands the particular coercive force. If anything, you sidestep my analysis on coercion, and so there's a lot of sidestepping in this debate. No, thank you. So I think what that means is that we allow women to access education in a better way. The next question becomes who achieves more benefits, because I think this side are quite sneaky in that they wish to prop particular policies and whatever. However, I think we provide the unique longevity of those policies in a way that this team cannot, because they correctly identify that women in these classes, or parents in these classes, are privileged and make up the elite in the political class. And what that means is we are having a prevailing elite class that does not care about children, that does not see motherhood as valuable, does not have models of, for example, the importance of families and things like that, because we are moving to a point where the majority of people in those communities will not be mothers and will not see children as policy goals worth pursuing and things in terms of other things like that. They are the people that set the corporate thing that allow you to take maternity leave. They are the people that set the standard of will you get paid, will we allow fathers to take paternity leave as well. When we made them care about children, when we made them see them as valuable, when they were able to use their lobbying to get those benefits, to see those things as valuable, we were able to lock in benefits for everyone. So whilst this side, for example, could roll out welfare, we could roll out specific policies about parenting that benefited all families regardless of status, because we uniquely motivated and incentivized people to have children in a way this side were able to not. So we thought the political classes that are activated in this way. Speaker, CG provides you reasons why this countervailing force was not coercive. We provide you a reason why this would devastate poor communities and force parents into motherhood, and we give you a long-term trajectory as to why parenting policy would get better for all classes. For that reason, proud to propose.
Thank you, Speaker, for the speech of the floor.
fashionable in debating these days to try and overcomplicate everything. But at the end of the day, at least for me sitting in opposition to it, this debate seems relatively straightforward. We have scarce resources, and presumably we want to use them to maximise societal good. And we need to make some trade-offs and decisions about where we allocate those resources. And we look at a spectrum of parents from low education to high education, and we ask, where should we put this money? And the case that we brought you at closing opposition that was quite clear was that rich people already have the lowest barriers to having children under the status quo. Poor people will derive the most societal benefits from having larger families and expanding their communities, and often make excellent parents and should be encouraged to do so. And the rich people who choose not to have children should have that choice legitimated by the state, because often they're making it for perfectly reasonable reasons relating to the fact they'll probably be terrible parents who raise a whole little generation of little privileged snotlings. Like, it's a straightforward case, right? And so my whipping is essentially going to restate most of those principles and bash away the rather unloving responses we received from opposing government. So let's start with a little bit of rebuttal to what we came out of the government work. So they were like, baby bonus Australia was terrible policy. It's like, well, surely we can structure the policy using conditions or using in-kind support rather than cash support by doing all of the things both the open team seem to think the policy was about rather than cash payments around childcare subsidies and all those things. So we think it's relatively easy to implement baby bonuses, like a lot of Scandinavian countries have done it, that don't necessarily have the corrosive problem. It also kind of knifed the entire case, right? Because they were suddenly now happy to wade into the empirical question of which parents are good parents, which parents are bad parents, and abandoned the idea that we should be agnostic to that when it came to bashing us on the baby bonus. So we think that was a little bit problematic from their side of the house. Then we had a bit of a bash about the fact, we should be neutral about different parents' characteristics. It's like, no, right? Like, the purpose of this policy is to attempt to encourage people to make decisions they hadn't previously. We should probably assess the outcomes of those decisions. And so all of our material about how rich parents are not necessarily going to be good parents, and there's actually structural reasons to believe they won't be, and there's structural reasons why poor people might be better parents, are directly relevant to the question of which groups we should be allocating money to encourage them to have children. And to the extent to which it's a wash, and everyone in the debate agrees that parents of rich and poor may be equally likely to have children that contribute to our society, then surely the conclusion has to be not to allocate money disproportionately to one group, to spread it evenly, which was the opposition's case in this entire debate. The next thing the closing government came with, I thought was a cracker of a point, when they were like, we should use this as an indirect subsidy to pursue tertiary education. You know what would be an easier route to get that? Just subsidise tertiary education, right? And don't make it conditional on having a baby. That seemed like not a very good point.
Yeah, in order for your extension to work, you need to prove that someone's desire to have children is a good operationalized predictor of their capacity to be a good parent. You need to prove this.
It's probably not a bad proxy, right, for their desire. For people understand their individual circumstances the best, surely better than the state looking from a 20,000-foot view. And also we think that lots of poor people making the decision to have children are doing so rationally for all of the reasons Josh gave you that your closing government refrained from responding to. So yes, I think that is a perfectly reasonable proxy. And yes, there'll be situations where it's not 100% accurate, right, but it only needs to be accurate on aggregate. We think we can easily establish that. Right, rich people having too many kids. We quite like the fact that rich people are choosing to specialise away from having child rearing as their primary way of contributing to society, right? Because you can do things like form other social connections. You can look after your parents, you can raise pets, you can look after your neighbours. And we think allowing people to have a diversity of social connections being prioritised, if they reasonably think that's fair, is really good, particularly in an increasingly atomised society. And although Josh gave you all the reasons as well as to why the child-rearing relationship might be the least effective way for these people to contribute in a relational sense in their communities, right? They probably have high levels of neuroticism, right? There's a strong correlation between neuroticism and high performance in the labour market, right? Which often makes these people demanding, unhappy, not very effective parents, right? They're going to put huge expectations on their children. But also remember, these are the most marginal children as well, right? Because these are the people who sat there and were like, I don't really want to have a kid, but I can get some money from the government, so maybe I will have a kid, right? That's the characterisation of poor people is coming from that side, so presumably applies to rich people as well. So they're having kids in the situations where they really weren't sure they wanted to have them. And we just think that's not very good for those children. And it's also important to note that the reasons I gave you why rich people are not able to access children, like they're time poor, or they're busy, or they're stressed, are firstly not commensurate, right? You can't compensate for the fact you're stressed and live a busy life that makes it hard to raise children with cash, right? So you get rich parents who have a cash incentive that has caused them to have children or have been incentivized other ways, but still have all the pressures in their life around their time poverty or their stress or how nasty their job is or how just atomized their community are. Those impact on the child regardless of how the parent's decision to have children has been affected by the incentives that have been put in place, right? So we still think for the very structural reasons they were concerned about, those children are going to be raised in communities that are bad for them, right? Like if I'm a woman who still feels a societal pressure to not have kids because I know it will destroy my career, and then I have a kid because of the marginal incentives you put in place, I might resent that child and the impact it's had on my career, and we think that's likely to make those kids grow up unhappy, impoverished emotional lives, and it's something we don't think we should be deliberately trying to encourage through social engineering. Like obviously the kids should be the most important actor in this debate. Right, let's talk about the poor.
Before you do.
No. So, what we said in this debate was that if you look at what builds low socioeconomic, low trust communities into higher performing, higher well-being communities, is often mediated through the mechanism of family formation. And the people who are most vulnerable in our communities are people who are atomized individuals, often young men, who do not belong to large, coherent families. They're not pair bonded, they don't have a social situation that provides them with stability. We said that if you want to make a social investment to promote well-being, one of the best ones you can make is supporting strong family formation amongst the lower classes. And we gave you a number of mechanisms that the opposing government literally just refused to engage with, presumably because they didn't have a response. We said that it builds social trust in communities where people often have low levels of trust, because bigger families who share your demographic and religious views, for example, are much more likely to cause you to feel trustful and secure in your community. We told you that gave you a labour force that was useful for you being able to support family enrichment through the traditional mechanism that particularly immigrant communities use, which is relying on large families to cross-subsidise labour in their enterprises, making them cost competitive and allowing them to enter the economic competition. It also does things like allows you to spread your risk, right? Because if you're a poor family, if you have lots of children, some of those children are going to be successful and they're going to be able to leverage your community out of poverty. And that's something that's a very powerful mechanism over time for breaking down the barriers between rich and poor. And we also said that tying people together with child-rearing relationships is a really good way of making families stronger and reducing things like divorce rates or just like a failure to form strong monogamous bonds, which again is good for societal cohesion in these communities. And this material was critical, right? Because this debate wasn't just about the abstract principle of like everyone should get money to have kids, right? It's about which policies the government should pursue in allocating that money to achieve social benefits through social engineering, and we think it's much better directed towards the poor. Thank you very much.